Senator Cotton is back. Senator, I don't know how much you caught of my first question before you dropped. I didn't notice the exact timing. But I want to spend some time on the convention and what you're going to say. But I was trying to get you to comment quickly on if you had a reaction to some of the rioting that's going on.
Yeah, sorry, Alex, for the drop call. The rioting in Kenosha is deeply disturbing. I've seen videos, as many of your listeners probably have, of a mob rampaging through the streets, smashing property, destroying cars, threatening innocent citizens. This is apparently in response to a police officer-involved shooting, the details of which I don't know in full, and you don't know, and hardly anyone else does. We need to learn those details. That's the proper thing to do anytime there's an officer-involved shooting. If there was misconduct, the criminal justice system should address it. What cannot be the response to one of these shootings is the kind of mob violence we saw in the streets the last 2 nights in Kenosha. The police and the local sheriff's deputies are apparently either overwhelmed in numbers or they were restrained by local liberal politicians. But there cannot be another night of such rioting in Kenosha. The local authorities need to put an end to it, and if they can't, then Tony Evers, the Democratic governor of Wisconsin, needs to call out the National Guard in force to protect the property and the lives of their citizens.
There's a couple of follow-ups, and I don't want to spend too much time because I know your time is always precious here, but there's a couple of follow-ups, and the first one is that do you feel like there's a role of the federal government with some of the riots the way they are now? We've spoken about this past on the show, but for people who might have missed that interview, you were one of the first to kind of recommend that there is more done than the standard being able to try to use some sort of federal resources to try to quell some of this unrest.
So these rioters and looters need to know that the federal government is a backstop for public safety. The Insurrection Act is always the last resort in these circumstances, but it always remains a possibility, and it's been used repeatedly throughout our history to restore order. I know the president doesn't want to use the Insurrection Act, especially if it's not requested by the local governor or local authorities. But short of that, there are things the federal government can do. There are federal crimes that may have been committed in these riots. The use of any kind of incendiary device or, agitating or fomenting a riot in violation of one's civil rights or violations of federal criminal law, as are any kind of destruction on federal property or any kind of destruction of statues or memorials to one's military service. And in cases where there is a federal case to make, the Department of Justice should aggressively pursue those charges and hold it up as an example of what will happen to other rioters and looters if they don't obey the law.
Yeah, and I got a wide libertarian streak and a huge federalist streak, but when you're seeing this footage of entire car dealerships burned out over this, you do feel like there needs to be more done on not just a local, but a state and even national level. It's very difficult to deal with some of these in this hyper-partisan and political moment because you already have Joe Biden basically suggesting this is systemic racism before we even know the full context. And it's something where we're not allowed to debate and discuss these issues. We must demonstrate immediately before we get to the bottom of it. And it's just, we don't do any critical analysis of these situations. We just demonstrate and emote. And I find this to be a new development and a scary one.
Alex, the media and the Democrats are letting passion run roughshod over our reason. The reason's responsible answer to any such incident is to have a proper investigation to ascertain the facts, not to jump to conclusions based on 15 seconds of video posted on social media out of all context before and after. But that's what happened to my units in Iraq and Afghanistan, Alex. If you had a shooting, you'd do a quick after-action review. And if there was any question that the shooting was inappropriate or could have been avoided, you might have an operational stand-down for a day or two while you continued to ascertain all the facts. What we did never do was jump to conclusions about what our soldiers had done. We should never jump to conclusions about what law enforcement does in the heat of the moment. If after ascertaining all the facts, there is misconduct, then an officer should be held accountable. Most police officers agree with that. What we should not do is immediately accuse police officers of racism or accuse America of being a racist nation, nor should we allow people to rampage in the streets, destroying property and threatening lives. That kind of violence has to stop. The Democrats are saying nothing about it because it's their policies in our cities that have led to this breakdown of public order.
Yeah, great point, and I could opine further, but I don't want to take the time. So let's move on towards the conventions. Did you get a chance to watch much last night?
I did watch the convention last night. I thought it was a great kickoff evening to the Republican National Convention. Unlike the Democratic National Convention, we actually laid out what the president has accomplished over the last 4 years and what we hope to accomplish over the next 4 years.
You know, I was struck by three things. There was compelling character witnesses on behalf of the president. There was a much more uplifting tone than the Democrat convention, and there was far more specifics in terms of policy that has either been put in place or will be put in place if the president's given 4 more years. I'm happy to start at any of those three pillars there, Senator.
Well, I just thought that the case that was made for what the president had accomplished versus what Joe Biden will do over the next 4 years, especially as it relates to our recovery from the coronavirus, from standing up to these mobs in the streets and defending our nation from threats abroad, in particular from China, was a crystal clear contrast from what you saw last week at the Democratic National Convention.
Were you struck as I was at how dark and gloomy, and you're a very serious person and you've lived a very serious life, and but we've met in person and you've got a sense of humor. You have fun. The Democrats are just so down in the dumps all the time, and that really came through. And I felt like over the course of last night, I got a hopeful vision for the United States, an empowering vision, and not a vision that America is not just a bad country, but a country that is bad to our core. Our bones are bad. Their foundation is bad. That was what I was told for 8 hours last week.
The Democratic National Convention portrayed a bunch of politicians who want to lead a nation that they apparently loathe. They repeatedly told us that America is rotten and racist and sexist to its core, which Americans reject fundamentally. Of course, America is a flawed and imperfect nation because we're a nation of flawed and imperfect people throughout our history, but no nation has ever strove more successfully to achieve equal justice under law for all of its citizens or to defend freedom abroad. We ought to be proud of those accomplishments, and we ought to be proud to lead America. That's what you heard last night. That's what you can hear from the next 3 nights as well.
So let's hear about a couple of the specifics that are most important to you. And I want to start with China. Way more throwdowns on China last night than through the whole week, the Democrat convention combined. Shouldn't be a surprise to anyone, but you've been the leader in the Senate on this topic, and it is the geopolitical threat, in my view. You can compare and contrast or speak to any remarks you might make towards China, wherever you want to take it.
Well, I mean, Alex, just look at the amount of mentions of China last week versus the conversation about China last night. I think China was mentioned maybe once in all 4 nights of the DNC.
That's all I counted, just once.
Whereas last night it was a centerpiece about what we've done to stand up to China for closing our factories and laying off our workers and stealing our property, threatening our nation and our allies. Joe Biden and the Democrats have virtually nothing to say about China at their convention. That's in part because of what they have said about China for 50 years. Barack Obama's own Secretary of Defense said that Joe Biden has been wrong on nearly every major national security decision for 40 years. And there's no more major decision, no more major issue than China. And just in the height of this campaign, Joe Biden says China is not even our competitors. He refers to Chinese communists as not bad folks. That's his exact words. Maybe he thinks they're not bad folks because his son took away $1 billion in private equity money from China,
sure.
and is still engaged there. It's kind of funny that, you know, the 2 places that Barack Obama entrusted foreign policy to Joe Biden, Ukraine and China, are the 2 places where Hunter Biden made out like a bandit. Which will probably give you a sense of what's to come in the future.
Yeah, as Senator, you had to have chuckled a little bit before the former vice president's speech last Thursday, where Hunter Biden was one of his character witnesses.
I did indeed. I imagine that Hunter will be off the campaign trail all season long, but probably putting him on a pre-taped video will be the most we see about him. In the end, though, what worries me most is not how the foreign policy of a Biden administration would impact the Biden family. It's how it would impact normal American families all across the country. And to have a president as weak and wrong as Joe Biden is on China would mean that they would continue to steal our factories, take our jobs, to steal our intellectual property, and to ultimately and potentially replace us as the world's dominant economic and military power. That would be terrible for American families, even if in the meantime it would be good for Joe Biden's family.
So set the stakes for us. Let's say the president gets reelected, and let's say that the Republicans hold the Senate and perhaps even make some gains in the House versus the alternative. What's the difference policy-wise from your vantage point? Because you're gonna win re-election, and so you'll be there for a while. And so set the difference, set the tone.
Well, so first, just to continue the line about China, 4 more years of the Trump administration really will cement the policies that have started reversing 30 years of failed China policy, of standing up to their trade depredation, rebuilding our military so it's prepared to deter Chinese aggression, protecting the next generation of technology from Chinese domination as well. But of course, it's much more than that, too. A Biden administration with Democrats in Congress would raise your taxes by $4 trillion. They'll decriminalize crossing our border illegally. Once those illegals are here, they'll give them free health care while they take your health care away from you on the job. Those are all stated policies of the people that are writing Joe Biden's platform, Kamala Harris and Bernie Sanders and Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez. Of course, those are just the traditionally radical things they would do. Look what else they want to do as well. They want to make Washington, D.C. a state so they can give the swamp as many senators as every other state has in the U.S. Senate. They want to pack the Supreme Court. They want to pass Nancy Pelosi's radical voting law that would mandate universal mail-in balloting without photo identification, without even signature verification. They want to give amnesty to 15 to 20 million illegal immigrants with almost immediate voting rights. They want to permanently alter the structure of government in America because they're angry that the American people haven't entrusted them with power, complete and unchecked power for the last 10 years. And they want it back, and they don't want to relinquish it.
Yeah, I was actually struck by Donald Trump Jr., who had a line that kind of flew under the radar where he was actually seemed to splash some cold water on unlimited legal immigration, which is so much of the focus is on illegal immigration. But we also have an issue where we import a lot of people to compete with Americans, which is when the unemployment rate is 3%. That's much more defensible when you're in the middle of a crisis where you got 40 million new people unemployed.
It makes absolutely no sense at this moment, when we have millions of people still out of work, to be bringing in foreign workers to take their jobs. We need to focus on getting American citizens back into the workforce and back working again. So many Americans have lost their job through no fault of their own and no fault of their businesses. They lost it because of this virus that China unleashed on the world. We should not be bringing in more foreign workers to take those jobs. Even before the pandemic, though, Alex, there was plenty of evidence that there was still many millions of Americans who were not actively looking for work, who could have gotten into the workforce and could have gone to work if we weren't bringing in millions of guest workers and new visa holders every single year. We need to focus on hiring American before we continue to bring in foreigners to take jobs in America.
Senator Tom Cotton, Republican from Arkansas, speaking Thursday night at the RNC. We'll carry it here, and then we'll play some clips Friday, as previously noted. Senator, here's the big question. Can you give us a taste, a preview, a tease of what you're going to be covering?
Yeah, Alex, I'm very much looking forward to contrasting Joe Biden's record of abject failure for the last 50 years in national security to Donald Trump's putting America first over the last 4 years. Contrast like Joe Biden opposing, for goodness sake, the mission that killed Osama bin Laden, while Donald Trump rained death in the sky on Iran's terrorist mastermind. or Joe Biden treating Israel like a nuisance, whereas Donald Trump moved our embassy to Jerusalem and is now brokering peace deals in the Middle East. I could go on and on and on, but I'll leave that for Thursday night. Suffice it to say, President Trump stands up for America. Joe Biden is weak and wrong and will not stand up for America.
You know, it was amazing when they were portraying Biden as this force of nature in the Situation Room during the DNC. And didn't he oppose the bin Laden raid? I mean, arguably the best foreign policy move Obama.
So he opposed the mission to kill Osama bin Laden. Donald Trump killed Qasem Soleimani. Donald Trump killed Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi. Donald Trump has shown no hesitation to apply military force in a targeted and calibrated way against America's worst enemies, whether it was Soleimani or whether it's Baghdadi or whether it's against the Syrian regime for gassing its own people. That's one reason why Donald Trump has kept us out of a larger war, is he is willing to apply military force in those targeted ways that protect our interests and deter our enemies from thinking that they can take even more aggressive action against us. Weakness is provocative, Alex, and Joe Biden has been weak and wrong for 40 years. Donald Trump has been strong and right for 4 years. That's one reason why we have fewer Americans dying overseas now than we haven't had at any time in the last 20 years.
Yeah, and I mentioned last hour the president's foreign policy has been exemplary, and you're a perfect person to make the case for it. So we will hear from Senator Tom Cotton on Thursday. Senator, as always, I really appreciate all the time.
Thanks, Alex. Great to be on with you.
As always, I agree. Let's take a break. We'll be back with your calls.